Hello, God bless you all, ScotsMaiar here, and welcome back to Professor Layton Month. Video games rarely get the proper movie treatment, don't they? Unfortunately, despite our advanced methods of storytelling within the visual medium of film and television, over the years we have seen more mediocre and outright bad adaptations than good ones when it comes to adapting video games. Too many times people say, oh, that's too campy, that's too cheesy, they did that focus too much on the gore, that focused too much on other elements. This is more like a theme park than the actual story of the game. Oh, this is just a cash excuse to cash in on the game. But what if I told you there was a movie out there that was a video game adaptation based on a beloved franchise made by the same creators of said franchise and is actually good? Dare I say, rewatchable? Preposterous, you might think. How can such a heavenly miracle occur? It starts by paying attention to the games, and fortunately, the creators of this movie are the very people who made the games. If there is anyone who understands the Professor Layton games more than anybody, it's the creators themselves. Even right down to the same animation crew behind the amazing cutscenes of the game, all the way to the talented voice cast, with a few changes for some of the characters for some reason, and even having cameos of characters from both the original and prequel trilogy. And yes, even Stashin Scarfin makes an appearance in the background in one scene. And here's a fun fact. I noticed this in the DVD stores, and despite playing a little bit of a demo for Professor Layton and Pandora's Box in the game shops, the movie was how I got properly introduced to the Professor Layton franchise. That was before I managed to play Professor Layton in the Lost Future with this DSi I got for Christmas one year. And I've been playing most of the games ever since. Is this really a good adaptation or just overhyped? Let's find out. Let's solve this puzzle, shall we? How to make a video adaptation good. Something worth noting is that a lot of video game adaptations, especially the Pokemon film franchise, has been criticized for not being so easy on newcomers. Take Pokemon the first movie, for instance. Anybody going into the first movie would initially think that this movie would introduce the concept of Pokemon. Except they move straight into this other plot involving Mewtwo, and we are never told what Pokemon are until, I believe it was the 8th movie in this film franchise. Whereas in Professor Layton and the Eternal Diva, Luke Triton narrates, and before the film starts, there is literally an introduction telling the audience what Professor Layton actually is all about. Luke Triton literally says it started as a game. It shows off Curious Village, Pandora's Box, Lost Future, and Spectre's Call, which was about to be released at the time. On the DVD, there was even an advert for Lost Future, which has even more gorgeous visuals when you watch it on the big screen. And Luke Triton says that Professor Layton was a puzzle-solving adventure game, which was beloved by fans all over the world. And now Layton is taking the leap from game into movie. And then we're introduced to the gentle English gentleman himself. After that spoken intro, we are introduced to Professor Layton and Luke via them solving a mystery and solving a puzzle that unlocks this door within the Big Ben, and then revealing the culprit who silenced the bell, which is Don Paolo in disguise. We get cameos of characters from the original trilogy, and it's described how Layton is a successful professor. It's established that the professor is a successful archaeology teacher at Crescent Hill University, archaeologist, puzzle solver, and true gentleman, and lover of tea. Then Luke goes to describe himself as his apprentice. He describes his strange supernatural ability to talk to animals for some reason, how he helps the professor daily. One day he's cutely trying to imitate the professor, when he brings along a music vinyl track with a song sung by one of the professor's students, which reminds them of a mystery that they solved 3 years ago. And thus we're taken back to the prequel timeline, and within 5 minutes of brilliant presentation and excellent music, the audience knows who Professor Layton and Luke are, what they do for a living, all before diving into this adventure. Now, admittedly, the non-linear structure of the opening scenes can be a bit disorientating, as after the intro it cuts back and forth between them in the theater and then them reading Janice's letter and them on their way to the theatre. But fortunately after that, it goes straightforward linear after that. One could argue it gets you in the mindset of puzzle thinking, but it can be a little bit overwhelming for newcomers. But nevertheless, the plot explains that one of the professor's students, Janice, who went on to be an opera singer, is performing as the main soprano lead of an opera depicting the legend of the Kingdom of Ambrosia, composed by Oswald Whistler. The opera depicts a queen who was beloved by her people until she unfortunately fell ill. And right when she was dying, a cure was found, the elixir of eternal life. Unfortunately, the queen passed away, leaving all the citizens to drink from this elixir in hopes that one day their queen would return. Whilst this is happening, the professor had received a letter from Janice telling him that something strange has happened. That she was minding her own business when she encountered her long-lost best friend, Amelia Whistler, the daughter of Oswald Whistler. You see, a few years prior to this case, Oswald Whistler's daughter, Amelia, unfortunately passed away, and Janice claims to have seen her again in the body of a little girl. This seems unorthodox at first, but the little girl says things that only Janice and Amelia would know. When Janice asked this little girl, she responded that she has the gift of eternal life. Perplexed by the supernatural mystery, combined with being tied with the lost kingdom of Ambrosia, the professor and Luke head out to the theatre to see what they can do to solve this mystery, whilst the professor's other assistant, Emmy Altava, stays behind to do her own research. After watching the opera, composed through the genius orchestral instrument from Oswald Whistler known as the Detrigan, it doesn't take long for Layton and Luke to realize that something odd is happening. For instance, the audience seemed quite bored with the opera, but then get excited when the host approaches the stage, promising a miracle. The host describes that one member in the audience is going to gain the gift of eternal life, on the condition of playing a game involving a contest with every single member of the audience. Whoever wins gains eternal life, but those who lose will lose their lives. So yeah, despite being family-oriented, it's not afraid to go dark when it needs to. Surely enough, some audience members are attempting to leave, but they get halted and they fall through trapdoors. To make matters worse, after Inspector Grosky attempts to arrest the host only to find out that it's a puppet, the theatre itself turns out to be a huge ship which takes them all off as captive. And to rub more salt into the wound, they are surrounded by sharks so they can't swim their way out either. Unless you're Inspector Grosky. And so the host presents the contest in a series of puzzles similar to the games, and the professor finds that he has no choice but to team up with Luke and his previous student Janice, as well as some other characters who are caught in this situation, and some selfish celebrities who just want eternal life for themselves, and the professor intends on solving the mystery. From what I described, and from other events that happen in the movie, you can tell that this movie already gets a bit convoluted, which is one of the reasons why it's rewatchable. Fortunately, it's not convoluted to the point where it doesn't make sense. It's just convoluted in a way where you just have to keep up with all the plot lines, and you may have to do a similar approach to Luke, and just humbly take down some notes as the film goes along. And regardless of what you think, the whole thing is a spectacle. The animation team put their all into this movie. The overall presentation is as smooth and charming as the games are, and the CGI used may be a tad bit distracting, but for the most part, it generally works quite well. And the whole presentation is immediately enhanced with the immense orchestral music. I just love orchestral music. The whole soundtrack is a big highlight. Some music even comes back for different moods throughout the game, whether it's more exciting or maybe it's more poignant, or whether it be Layton's theme kicking in as he unleashes his powers of intuition, or even Descalet's theme, which is just a true spectacle throughout the entire movie. Oh yeah, mild spoilers alert, Descalet is in this. And throughout the second half of the movie, he pretty much steals the show in all the best ways possible. And for the newcomers who might be a bit confused as to why certain characters are familiar with Descalet in this movie, that's because this movie is set after Professor Layton and the Spectre's Call. The mystery is quite intriguing, and on an animation standpoint, I love how we get to venture into the immaterial logical mind of Layton during certain parts when he's trying to solve certain puzzles or certain ways to get out of sticky situations. or even parts of the mystery. It's like a pseudo Sherlock montage, which is fairly similar to the black stuff that you see when you solve a puzzle. Everything just sort of goes into Layton's mind. You see brief images as we go around Layton as he's just thinking and thinking. Then you hear a ding as he figures out what the solution is. And one fun part of the movie is that the audience themselves can engage in some of these puzzles too. Some of these answers are completely obvious. I had a friend of mine who saw the first puzzle and thought, it's the stars, it's the stars, it's obviously the stars. Then there's another scene where they're chased by wolves who are under this mind control, and they noticed cages. Now at first you'd think, oh, okay, simple, they're just gonna trap the wolves in the cages. But then Layton and his friends come up with a more clever idea. They trap themselves in the cages, lift the cages up, and just walk along, protecting them from the wolves. That caught my friend off guard. The dialogue can be quite witty and smart, although there are some times when you probably want to smack yourself in the face. There's a scene where Layton, Luke, and Janice are on this flying device that they improvised into creating. They're trying to get away from the wolves, and then Luke says, "Faster, Professor, they're catching us!" Luke, you're on a flying device! I know you gotta land at some point, but you're far above the harm of the wolves! There's another puzzle that involves letters, and it's very cleverly done on Luke's part, so I won't give that away. And in one puzzle, which I found quite clever in how they came up with the solution, it was Luke who came up with the solution, but then one of the selfish celebrities twists the answer into fooling other people into thinking it's a different solution. That's very clever. I could go on and on about this film, but once again, a running theme in the Layton month is that I will not spoil what happens. You just have to watch this movie for yourself, because it is a true spectacle to behold. What I will say is that there are some intriguing details that only the fans would notice. We cut back to Emmy doing her research, and she encounters Dr. Schrader. We get glimpses into his office, and we see that he's found the Elysian box. And he's poignantly reminding Emmy that despite our advanced technology and medicine, that we all must face death one day. Another particular highlight that I noticed when I was younger is that this film has some aspects worth analysing from a theological perspective. This meal that the characters have could be seen as a Last Supper allegory, the fact that eternal life plays such an integral part in the plot, the fact that the Ambrosian villagers are waiting for their queen to return, acknowledging supernatural stuff. It's not presented in an obvious way, but it is quite interesting. So, puzzle solved. This is indeed as deservedly hyped as it is. So, puzzle solved. That's how you make a good video game adaptation in a movie format. Having the original creators make it is a big bonus. You make it available for newcomers and fans alike, and you give us a strong story that can stand on its own without the games. You see, video game adaptations can be done right. And thank God that only recently people are starting to look into this. With films like Wreck-It Ralph, and I heard that the Witcher television series on Netflix was a smash hit.
As risky as that is.
And with the World of Warcraft movie being described as decent, I think we're finally approaching an age where people are taking video game adaptations seriously. I especially love the Wreck-It Ralph film franchise. So, with it being a good video game adaptation and an excellent Professor Layton story on itself, I give this movie an 11.5 out of 12. That's right, the same rating as Professor Layton and the Lost Future. I went that far. Although I have heard some people, my sibling included, that the games are better presented than the movie. And in some aspects, she is correct. Some stories are better told in an interactive format. But as I grew older, I really respect this film more and more for being such a successful adaptation. In fact, do you know of any excellent video game adaptations? Please let me know in the comments down below. I'm all ears. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. As Layton Month continues, ScotsMaiar signing out.